Many of the answers that we were given either early in life or later in life have never been substantiated. We haven't questioned them, and society isn't doing that for us. So I think it's going through and asking yourself, why do I believe this, and is it valuable to me? If the answer to that is no, being willing to replace those outdated programs with what works for you.
Herzlich willkommen heute bei Lernen der Zukunft und heute zum allerersten Mal einen englischsprachigen Gast, nämlich sitzt er heute in Oregon und ich begrüße Dr. Austin Perlmutter. Hello.
Hello.
I just told them that you're my first English-speaking guest, and we're going to try to still make it as easy as possible to understand. You, many people might know your father and you maybe now from this book, David Perlmutter, Austin Perlmutter. It's Blöd im Kopf, brainwashed in English, brainwashed. The idea behind it is basically that we have a problem. And I would like to...
Okay. So here is the paradox of the modern world. We have access, most of us, to everything we think we should need to be healthy, to be happy. Got lots of food. Most people have lots of food. We have tons of options for entertainment. We can literally swipe our screens and find a potential mate within a matter of moments. But we're not healthier. We're not happier. And in fact, when you look at statistics for chronic preventable diseases, they are going up exponentially around the world. Diabetes, obesity, heart disease, even Alzheimer's disease. And when you look at our mental health, the World Health Organization estimates that 350 million people right now are suffering from depression. So there's a disconnect here, right? We think we have the answers, and yet in practice, we're struggling. And what we talk about in Brainwash is that there are these fundamental systems within our bodies, within our brains that have been hacked. And the more we allow that hacking to happen, that manipulation of our brain circuitry to happen, the higher the chances are that we have a really bad time in life, that we wind up unhealthy and unhappy. But by understanding how our brains and bodies work, we can literally wash out these bad programs and start writing our own programs. When we do that, we have a far better chance at leading the lives that are in sync with what we actually care about.
Oh, yeah. And you're not only talking about, because I'm very much in my channel and in my realm, as you might say, it's very much about the mental stuff. It's about working with hypnosis, with your beliefs, your inner core beliefs, and try to do it on that way. But you say there's a huge part of it is also the not only the mind. It's very important, of course, but it's also the body. And what we put into our body, and we don't move anymore. We don't go out into the light. We don't sleep anymore. It's just everything seems to be messed up, and this is part where the solution starts, I guess.
It's exactly right. I think you can understand the world through many lenses, and one of those lenses is psychology. Is you talk about the mind and what it is that we have a preference for doing and how we
wrong
can get
programming, yeah. So
right,
your
exactly.
past, yeah.
So you can say, I'm stuck in the past and therefore I have depression. I'm stuck in the future. I have anxiety, and that we're kind of running an unhealthy program that potentially can be solved through things like talk therapy. But what we're talking about primarily in the book is what is the biology behind all of this? So what are the systems in the brain, in the body, that correlate with something like depression or anxiety, or really important, making bad choices? This is something that most people, I think, have a very hard time understanding. Our health, mental and physical, reflects the quality of our choices. If you make good choices...
Yes. This could be the headline. Your life is dependent on the quality of your choices that you make. Yeah?
But here's the thing. We think about choices as something that reflects our identity, our self, right? It's not really
and we think we have a free will, yeah?
Another important topic. But here's what I want people to understand is your choices are biological. So the molecules in your brain and your body drive your choices. if you want to make better choices, you need to command those molecules. You can't just have them be manipulated by whatever TV commercial you see or food that smells good in the store. That's where we start having problems. We've got to drive the ship here. Otherwise, we're just going off in whatever direction we're told to do. So that's really what brainwash is talking about. It's saying, what's happening in the body? What's happening in the brain? How can we be the masters of those elements instead of letting other people pull the strings?
Mm. I wanted to add, to gain to once again become the captain of your mind, but I questioned that we ever had that. At least in our generation, I guess we just grew up and we followed what we were told.
Yes, we're dancing here between concepts of determinism and free will and kind of social themes. But, I think the bottom line is we believe that we're in charge of certain decisions, but actually those decisions are being made for us. Because when you look at research on what happens when you take a child and put them in front of a TV and they see ads for cereals, junk food, that child will have then a preference for that junk food. And it's not just when they're 3 years old. That preference will last until adulthood. So really, these things that we believe are our own individual preferences are being instilled in us at a very early age. And the unfortunate reality is, when you look at the commercials that kids are watching across the world, this is not a US thing. I looked at research from a wide variety of countries, everything from the Middle East to Mexico to Canada, United States, and throughout Europe. The food commercials we're seeing are for junk. The celebrities that we have endorsing foods are endorsing junk foods. Whether it's a sports athlete or a music celebrity, they're talking about this junk. And that programs into us at a young age those connections. Take it a step further. Think about your favorite holiday. Chances are, maybe it's different for you. In the States, every single holiday is associated with eating junk food. On Halloween, we eat junk candy. On Thanksgiving, we eat all this pie. On Easter, we celebrate by catching these chocolate eggs and then filling our bellies with jelly beans. So it's all an association, right, between these.
All binging, yeah.
Yeah, but we're eating this junk food that is then programming our brains and our bodies, our microbiome, whatever it is you want to think about, to make bad decisions. So we have to start thinking about, every aspect of our lives, but specifically, how are our brains being programmed at a young age? Because it happens throughout our lives, but we're much more sensitive as children.
There are two parts that we will talk about today. The first part, I would say, if I'm a parent, if I'm an educator, if I'm a teacher, what can I do to positively influence my children, my pupils, my students? This is the first part, and the second part is, what can we do if we're already in the bad situation that we have been programmed to get out of there? Because as we said, especially now in the last few years, last year especially, many people have been sitting home and have even had more stress and more depression and eating disorders, and all the other bad stuff happened.
Right. So your questions are kind of, what do we do to prevent problems? And then what do we do when we're already in the hole?
Yes.
And I
just
think
the two small questions,
So you talk
I know
about
there are complete master studies out there talking about this for years, but you do it in half an hour. Yeah.
The bottom line is that there are different ways to approach this. So when you talk about prevention, you can talk about primary, secondary, whatever, but you can talk about kind of political changes, policy level changes that are going to
I would say it's a smaller. It's in the within the family,
Okay.
within my reach. What can I do as a mother, as a father, as a teacher? How can I at least try to prevent them from always eating French fries with lots of ketchup?
Yeah, when I was a kid, my mom and my dad decided that I was going to eat primarily plant food and primarily organic food, and that made
once
it
again,
really
Dr. Perlmutter is a very famous US what would you call popular
Neurologist.
doctor? Yeah,
Sure.
always
Sure.
on the media, David Perlmutter, and he's famous for his anti-gluten,
Refined carbohydrate.
yeah,
Right.
in
Right. Simple
general.
carbs.
Yeah, yeah.
But he, even when I was younger, he and my mom had
But the
decided.
problem is one thing. The problem when people stop eating the bad carbs, they start eating more meat, and this is not the solution.
So that is another theme which we can get
Yeah,
into,
no,
which
we
is
don't have to,
what
but
should
I
I be
just have
eating?
to add that. Yeah.
Right. All of these topics can go down the rabbit hole. And
Mm.
I think what we really want to get to is, what do I do next? What do I do
Yes.
about all of this?
Yes.
Because I think we're all in agreement. Foods that are out there are not very healthy, mental health not very good. So what do we do about this? But I wanted just to finish up this story here real quick, because when I was a kid, my mom would send me with carrot sticks, um, all this other organic stuff that at the time I thought was not cool and not tasty. But it was what they believed was key, because that was an early time in my life that I needed these nutrients. And I think that
Mm.
this is the challenge a lot of people get into, which is they want to do certain things for their kids, but either because of financial limitations or because they don't want their kids to resent them, they don't impose that, whether that's TV time or the food they want them to eat. And I think, I don't have kids, but you can't control every element. You can't, keep a person in a house and never have them exposed to the environment and expect that that will lead to a healthy person. For example, you need some nature in your life if you want to colonize your microbes in a healthy way. You can't stay inside your whole life. And I think it's similar as it relates to the negative input coming in from the outside world. But I think a couple of boundaries are probably important. And I think that, for the most part, trying to promote eating actual food. You don't have to go into every layer of minute detail, but most of the foods that are out there are they're composite junk. They have added sugar, they have added unhealthy vegetable fats. And I think if you can just start moving towards single ingredient foods, even don't worry as much from my perspective about making sure they're all organic. That's tough to control for. But saying an apple is different from, the powered or the protein bar that's apple flavored. So trying to promote real foods as much as possible. And I think the other piece of this is the other major variable would be kind of the digital exposure, because we don't pay attention to how those digital inputs shape our brains. And so I think, again, I don't have kids. It's much easier for me to say, but having a general idea as to what type of digital content they're consuming and trying to set some safe limits as far as how many hours a day is probably a good starting point. So I think the food and the digital consumption would be the two things that I would really recommend. There's the last thing maybe to think about is, how do you instill a practice of mindfulness, being more aware as a kid? And that is another challenging topic. I think that so much of our society keeps us from being mindful, keeps us from being more aware. And anything that you can do, taking them into nature, for example, that helps to facilitate
That
more
was what I was
connectivity.
thinking. Go with them into the woods. Go with them just out there in the green, and let them play. Playing is mindful. You can't
that is
play
true.
without being mindful.
And let me just reference one quick study. They took children or kids out into the woods, and they stayed in the woods for a few days. They had another group that was in a city. And when they took these two groups and compared them, the group that was out in the woods was better able to recognize people's emotional state by looking at them than the people who stayed in the city. They could interpret facial expressions. They could say that person's probably feeling angry, sad, happy with more accuracy than the group that stayed in the city. So there is this dynamic of reconnecting with nature that appears to give us an interpersonal connection.
Wow.
People who are out in the woods also display more empathy towards each other. So this is a really key thing, because if you think about, the value of empathy, it's something that we've kind of lost. And there's research to substantiate that. So nature exposure, great example of mindfulness, one of maybe the three things that I would recommend for kids. So we'll pause there. I know your second question is a tough one too.
Yeah. My second question is, now, if we are already programmed, if we are already in the situation that maybe a bit overweight or at least depressed, just all the things that happen, if you have a normal, as bad as it is, a normal life in our societies, how can we, as you call your book, brainwash?
Right. There are several
You have
blanket
10 ways in the
ideas
book,
here.
of course.
Yeah, we do. But let's just focus on the general idea behind this.
Mm,
And I said this before, but I want to make it clear.
mm,
Normal in the modern day is not good.
mm, mm.
If you are having a normal life, you're probably not doing well. And that's because the average person is suffering from at least one chronic, largely preventable disease, because mental health is not good, because we spend our lives constantly chasing something that we never achieve, which is happiness. So if you are experiencing life in a normal way, that's not a good thing. So if you're listening to this podcast, if you're watching this video, you have taken the single most important step, in my opinion, towards making that change, because you're trying to get some more information. You are building your awareness about what is going wrong, and you're open to making a change. One of the things that I find most challenging is when people tell me, I have somebody that I care about and they're unhealthy, they're unhappy. I want them to start eating healthier. I want them to start exercising. What do I do? And consistently, these are the hardest situations, because you can't just force somebody who doesn't care to care. And you may have
Shall I tell
experienced
you
this
what
in
my
your own life.
solution would be?
Go
Look
ahead.
into the mirror. Is it you?
And if the answer is no?
And if the answer is no, start with yourself. I guess the best thing you can do is just live it.
I like that. I think there has to be a combination of some kind of philosophy.
Of course, but if they live with you, if it's your partner, and they see how you thrive through doing this, I guess it might be helpful.
You can lead through example. I think that's key. But I also think one of the things that I found for my patients was super important is trying to figure out what they care about, and not assuming that because I care, they care. So often I would say, your blood pressure is high, you're at risk for heart disease, let's fix those things. And they wouldn't do it. And I thought it was because the advice was too complicated or something. And it's just because that wasn't their priority. We each have things that we care about, and we're willing to go to great lengths, I think, to make those happen. But we have to have that be in alignment, So I think when it relates to, let's say, dietary preferences, and I tell somebody, don't eat any more refined carbohydrates, don't eat as many fried and processed foods, that isn't in and of itself helpful unless that's where they already want to go. You have to understand, what are the things that are providing them pain in their lives, and how do you alleviate that pain? And if you can do that by making dietary changes, that's great. But I don't always think that's the first place I would go. So to come back to your question, let's say you're already a little bit stuck. You're stuck mentally, you're stuck physically, you're not happy with the body you have because you want to lose some weight or you want to lower your blood pressure. I think trying to look at what you can do to improve your brain function first is where I go.
Ooh.
And so the reason for that is, your health, as we said before, is a reflection of your decisions. If you're making good decisions, you get compounding interest. Things build up, and they build up in your favor. It's the same way if you're making bad decisions. You just start having worse and worse things happen. So what can we do that helps to fix the engine, the computer, the brain? And I think the easiest thing a person can do is looking at their sleep. And the reason for that is, you can talk about how diet influences health. Over the course of weeks, months, years, we know that a healthy diet is super important. We know that an unhealthy diet is very damaging. But with sleep, you can see after one night of sleep deficit how the brain changes. And you can experience this. I'm sure when you have missed out on sleep, you feel crummy.
Yep.
So what you're feeling there is literally your brain functioning worse. That's when you feel tired, when you feel anxious, when you feel like you can't focus because you didn't get good sleep. You're literally experiencing your brain having trouble because you didn't get that sleep. So I tell people the first thing I would do is look at your sleep. And coming back to this idea of brainwash, there's this research now that shows that sleep helps facilitate or helps to improve the junk drainage from the brain. So when you give yourself a good night of sleep, you're literally helping to clean out all of the junk that piled up during the day. And that's one of the reasons why you might feel better the next day after you get a good night's sleep. So that's really where I start. There are other areas too. I think we talked about nature exposure. Nature exposure improves decision making within seconds. It's incredible. So if you're trying to make better choices, giving yourself a little dose of nature each day is an awesome place to start. But those are the two I would recommend: getting better sleep and working on your nature exposure, because that's a wonderful place to start experiencing better brain function. You don't just have to think it's going to happen at some later date.
Mm, mm. And this is only for problems that we have with our body. We started with mental challenges that people face. That's starting from depression and anxiety and panic attacks and all the other bad stuff. Is it the same procedure?
So there is a ton of research showing that sleep deficit can be associated, long-term sleep deficit is associated with worse mental health. There's some interesting research showing that short-term sleep deficit may actually help depression, which kind of throws things off. But the long-run piece here is getting good sleep seems to support good mental health. Nature exposure, similar. There's correlation between more nature exposure, better mental health. But when you get to understanding, like we started this conversation talking about biology, I think we tend to look at mental health, anxiety, and depression as psychology that exists over here. And then we think about diabetes, obesity, heart disease as biology, because we can say, oh, diabetes, pancreas, heart disease, obviously heart, high blood pressure, that's an artery issue. But what we know very clearly from the science is that you don't have the mind here and the body here. They're one thing. And it's the same biology that drives mental health issues as that drives heart disease and diabetes. So when we're talking about these things in the book, diet, nature, a little time for meditation, perhaps, what we're really talking about is interventions that lower inflammation, that lower stress, because these are the pathways that seem to lead to all of these diseases. High stress, heart disease; high stress, depression, anxiety; inflammation, diabetes; inflammation, depression. And so trying to get to that kind of mutual target, that spot where everything comes together, whether that's hitting it first from sleep or nature or making some dietary changes, that is the key. And so, yeah, so to answer your question, no, they're not separate. You don't have mental health and then physical health. You have health, and you have the same molecules that are involved in both.
So your tip for starting would be start with your sleep.
I think
the first step. If the people
if you want to do one thing, right? If you want to do one thing today that is going to improve your brain function, I think that would be give yourself a good night's sleep tonight. And again, that's because you can see in the studies, but you honestly don't have to. I think all of us know how important that is. And I know personally, when I miss out on sleep, I am a mess the next day. So I think it's really a question of planning for tomorrow that we're missing out on. And so that means planning for a better brain tomorrow. That means giving yourself good sleep tonight. And then tomorrow, when you're feeling a little better, you'll be more willing to make a good food choice. It won't be such a struggle.
We're back at decisions, yeah. Yeah.
It's all decisions. It's all decisions. But the key is not to make all the decisions right at the same time. You can't just say, like most people do, life is easy. Just exercise twice a day, eat only healthy foods, give yourself 8 hours of sleep a night, don't get stressed about things. You can't just assume that the solution is to tell people what to do. You have to wire your brain to make it easier. And that's why sleep is such a great tool, because it literally wires your brain to make good decisions easier for you. So you're not struggling so much to make a healthy choice.
Thank you. Ja. Wenn Sie mehr nachlesen wollen, in dem Buch steht das ganze Programm mit drinnen. The last question that I ask every one of my guests is if they're the school of life. Okay, in school we learn so much stuff, but the most of it we never need it. Most of it we never need it again. We don't need to algebra and to do my algebra and all this stuff. But for a happy life, we're talking about happy life, and we're trying to lead a happy life, a fulfilling life, possibly. Yeah. What would be the subject in school? What would be the thing we should have learned, but we have never learned? What is this? You can do it. You can decide now. You are the minister for education.
This is such a good question. And it's a challenging one.
It's the main idea behind my podcast. Yeah.
I think the one intervention that I would make would be to increase the curriculum in mindfulness, because it's all about shifting from a reactive perspective to a reflective perspective, to being able to question, to weigh the pros and cons, and not simply react. And I think, the story that I learned in the United States, as far as here are the things that matter. You have to know American history. You have to know geometry, algebra, calculus. You have to know the social studies of what's happening. Those things don't seem to correlate all that well with being successful in life. But when you think about mindfulness, basically being in the moment, being able to have the experience that is independent of what other people think and what other people are doing, where you're content with yourself. And you said happiness. I know I talk about happiness in the book. I think it isn't happiness. It's being content. It's being satisfied. And that never comes from being reactive to what other people are doing. That has to come, I think, from inside. So it would be, a mindfulness curriculum where people are able to pay attention to what's happening inside, are able to develop the practices that will sustain that, and are able to develop the tools that allow them to catch themselves when they start getting derailed on that train.
Thank you. Sounds like a person who's really thought about this. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The final words. I always give my guests the opportunity to say the final words and give the main message, the idea that you want to be transferred into the minds of our listeners today. Wir haben heute Arzt Perlmutter zu Gast gehabt mit Brainwash, und die letzten Worte überlasse ich ihm. It's your stage. The stage is yours.
I would tell people what has been most valuable for me is to get outside for just a moment, I think linear track of assuming that the answers you've been given are the right answers. Many of the answers that we were given either early in life or later in life have never been substantiated. We haven't questioned them, and society isn't doing that for us. So I think it's going through and asking yourself, why do I believe this, and is it valuable to me? If the answer to that is no, being willing to replace those outdated programs with what works for you. And I think that this is a very challenging, scary process, but it is, I think, the key in enabling us to move towards lives that are in sync with who we actually are, and that aren't just kind of borrowing from whatever was put upon us early in life that maybe isn't that important.
Thank you. Just thank you. Sie haben jetzt zugehört und ich hoffe, Sie haben das meiste verstanden. Es war einfach nur schön, Ihnen zu lauschen. Ich wünsche alles Gute beim Ausprobieren und bis zum nächsten Mal.